Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Plug in Play podcast. I am your host, Henry, and I will be your liaison through the world of video games this day. We have a lot to talk about, don't we? So there's a lot going on. We got Jade Raymon stepping down from Haven Studios, leaving Fairgames in a lurch. We got Bungie going through crazy plagiarism, art, marathon, and a tizzy, and we'll go into that certainly in detail. I have my final updated impressions on Clair Obscure Expedition 33, what people are calling the game of the decade. We're going to see if maybe I agree, maybe I don't. We're going to find out towards the end of the podcast. Stick with me, ladies and gentlemen. But before we get into that, why don't you give us a rating on your favorite podcast service? 5 stars is recommended, not required, but you know, that's what I'd say. Maybe I'm biased, but, you know, we're on anything you want to listen to, you know, Spotify, Apple Podcast. Tell your friends, you know, send them a link. Let them know that this is the best gaming podcast out there. Again, maybe I'm biased. But if you want to be a part of the show, you can even send in an email to the pluginplaypodcast1@gmail.com email address. Be a part of the show. Wouldn't that be a fun time? I think so, but I think that's the general housekeeping we typically do. So we'll get into it. Kind of a interesting happening. Hope that you had a good Memorial Day weekend. You should be hearing this directly after it's over, so I hope you had some nice time to barbecue and remember our troops. God bless America and meet at the same time, of course, never separate. But I used the weekend to go to Atlanta, Georgia, and I went to Momocon. If you don't know of Momocon, it is a nerd culture convention, one of the biggest in the Southeast. Normally have around over 50,000 people there, so quite the gathering of people who never go outside. So, you know, kind of a paradox in that way. But I love conventions. Started going a few years back, and I've kind of slowly built up my tolerance to being around people like me in a way, and Momocon's pretty cool. Very, very huge, very, very, very big, and they try to put a lot of emphasis on video games, which you don't normally see. A lot of these conventions tend to put emphasis on, like, anime, general nerd culture stuff. So, you know, if you like Naruto or, like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Spider-Man, like, that's kind of your general con vibe when you go to these nerd culture conventions. Weirdly enough, you think video games are the biggest entertainment medium in the world, or at least certainly the most profitable one, and there aren't really that many conventions dedicated specifically to video games. You have your PAXs, you used to have E3 until it shut down, and you have a few other notable ones here and there, but there's really not that many. Momocon is it started off as an anime convention and kind of tried to widen the umbrella to gather a lot more people, and it definitely caught my interest. There was a Final Fantasy intimate, quote-unquote, so kind of like more, not like battle themes, but like almost town themes per se, orchestral concert on the final day that I went to. Really enjoyed it. You know, it was by the same people who I've talked on the podcast previously. They did a last year when Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out. They had a concert dedicated to that, and I went and saw that. Really enjoyed it. You know, I was thinking I probably wouldn't enjoy intimate music as much, but honestly, the orchestra is very talented and made all the pieces really, really stand out and really entertaining to listen to regardless. They had a lot of cool video game stuff. Specifically, they had like the regional Mario Kart, Halo, Super Smash Bros. Melee like tournaments, which were super interesting to watch. I enjoy playing like most of those games casually, specifically like Mario Kart, which, you know, like I enjoy playing that game with my friends fairly regularly, and you know, like, you know, I may be better at them than Mario Kart, but like watching these guys play, I was like, I didn't even know I didn't even know this was like a level of play you could consider for Mario Kart. I straight up thought Mario Kart was like 90% chance, like who gets what power up. But it's very interesting to watch high level Mario Kart players play competitively, because they're like, at what part of the track you're on and what power up you get, there's like a specific strategy that you should be utilizing like to gain an advantage, which is kind of insane for me to think about, like how active you have to be in strategizing because of the random elements of Mario Kart. It was very interesting to watch, and it was a very interesting tournament too, because the guy who was in second to last place ended up winning, who started off the tournament in second to last place, like basically climbed the leaderboards over the course of the Grand Prix and frickin' eventually took the whole thing. Very, very fun to watch. They had a whole speedrunning court, so like if you know of GDQ or Games Done Quick, it was kind of a like offshoot of that in a way, much smaller scale. Much smaller scale, but it was still cool to see that was even represented at this convention. But like what I really went to go see was a panel by two very, very legendary, I would say, game developers or directors. There was a joint panel from two Japanese developers called Swery and Suda51. And you may have heard of these guys before, specifically Suda51. Swery, which I've always called Swery, but I learned at this panel it's pronounced Swery. Swery, but it is Swery, excuse me, I'm going to revert to that several times, I assure you. He is the director of the game called Deadly Premonition, which is basically what people would kind of consider The Room of video games, if you know of The Room, like the kind of cult classic film that is like so bad it's good. It's kind of known for that. That's kind of what Deadly Premonition is. And, like it's, I mean, honestly, I've tried to play Deadly Premonition, and it's so bad I couldn't even play it. But it is very artsy, very out there, very confusing, and it's very wacky. To a point where it has gained a large cult following. The second one, they made a sequel to it, and it was so bad that people just didn't actually like it. And I was like, okay, yeah, you kind of get what you deserve there. But it's very, very, very artsy, very, very, like incomprehensible almost. Suda51 is a little bit more down to earth in that way. He's known for actually making games that people enjoy. You've probably known him best for No More Heroes. There's several No More Heroes games. They were a very popular, or at least a semi-popular game series following Travis Touchdown, where you have to like kill other assassins, which is pretty cool concept in general. The game is definitely cool as well. Definitely has like a very rock star vibe. Also a very wacky, artsy kind of game that doesn't make a lot of sense. Very Japanese. He's also the director behind Killer 7, another game that kind of is in the same vein, and Lollipop Chainsaw, which is like all of these games have something in common, which are they're all incredibly unfun to play. They are not very well designed games in terms of gameplay, but in terms of like their ideas and their creativity and their like personality, they're bar none. Like there is no comparison to these games out there at all. But these two directors teamed up, and they are now making their own game together, which is going to be kind of manned by Swery's team. I think it's like Twilight Owls or something like that is the name of his studio. But he's going to be also co-directing the game with Suda51, which is really cool because like they both kind of have a very similar style of being, these very artsy developers who, like make really games with really high personality, really lots of energy and personality to them. And that game is called Hotel Barcelona. And I got to hear them talk about it, and I got to see gameplay footage for it as well. I'm sure that gameplay footage, the trailers that I saw, will be up and about on the internet at some point soon, but you're getting the scoop 1st, ladies and gentlemen. That's right, the Plug and Play podcast with the scoop on Hotel Barcelona. Very interesting concept, as usual. This is not, obviously something you would expect from these guys. If they ever make a game, it is something really cool, really interesting. Like, you're probably going to be enamored with the concept of the game. But then you'll actually play the game and it will play like garbage, and you'll be like, well, at least there's some really cool ideas here. So yeah, Hotel Barcelona follows a lady. It's basically, what's the name of that movie? Cabin in the Woods is what they likened it to, and it was very reminiscent of that. It is a game that essentially pays homage to, generic horror tropes. So you're a woman going through a Hotel Barcelona, and there's different regions and areas of the hotel that are all themed after various horror genres. So like one that they referenced was like a summer camp like vibe. One was like a Japanese horror, like The Grudge, like that kind of deal, and you go into these various areas and you kill or, fight various horror tropes. I think that idea sounds honestly kind of cool. And then they showed the gameplay for it. And yeah, it looked jank as frick. It actually sounded like there were some interesting ideas. I was in a very crowded room for the panel, and like I heard some people, when I raised an eyebrow, I could hear the audience going like, oh, that's an interesting idea. So like it is a roguelike, which I'm already not super cool with, but like in the terms of like a horror like slasher vibe, I kind of understand it. But you're essentially going out, and when you die, your body turns into it's recorded. Like your playthrough is recorded as you go through a level. And so when you die and you start another run, that body will now be basically playing that recording and fighting alongside you during that playthrough. And that will kind of continue to repeat. And sometimes your body will turn into an enemy, like when you die, and so on and so forth. You can also, there's co-op in the game, which like you can join other people's games and help fight with them, or you can even join other people's games and fight against them, so kind of try to ruin their day in a way. I thought these ideas were really interesting. I don't know how they're going to be incorporated within the game in a way that makes sense and is fun. I really have to see how the whole game is designed in order to fully see if this particular kind of gameplay would work. This is a side-scrolling 2D beat-em-up kind of game. So like, if I'm going at a different pace as my double, or if I'm maybe wanting to explore a different area or go to a different, kind of do something a little bit differently than my double, that could really throw off the pacing of working together with my copy. And like, they could be completely useless very early on in a run if that's how that works. So like, I don't know. The gameplay did not look very good. The gameplay looked very, I'm not going to say generic, but yeah, it looked pretty like this is baby's first side-scrolling 2D beat-em-up game, which is not particularly surprising. Again, like I said, these developers are not known for very good gameplay. They're known for very interesting concepts and ideas, but not very good games. So, this is very much in line with that. And that's why I always look at these guys, specifically Suda51, who consistently has great ideas and horrible games. And I'm like, why is no one grabbing this guy saying you have creative control? Like, if you have control over the writing, you have control over scenarios, you have control over the story concepts, like, that's you. You're the idea guy. we have a gameplay director. Like, this is the combat director. This is the, like open world exploration director. They are going to be handling this. Like, you are not going to be doing that at all. Like, you are the creative director. You're not the director. And I don't know why, but nobody seems to do that for this guy. They always seem to just let him do his own thing, and it consistently ends up bad. So when I hear, oh, well, Swery's team is designing it, I go, oh, frick, that's even worse, because his games look even worse than Suda51's team. So I'm like, okay, this is this is the worst of both worlds. Like, you really can't. This game is probably going to be so unfun to play, but I am genuinely interested in hearing the concepts beyond it. The game is set to release in 2025. They actually, very funny enough, were like, holy frick, thank God GTA 6 is not coming out this year. Like, we were genuinely concerned about that. Please, for the love of God, wishlist this game. Please buy it, because like, we were genuinely concerned that if GTA came out at the same time, it was going to absolutely destroy us. Like, we weren't going to recover from it financially, which, like, you hear all the time, like, oh yeah, well, GTA is going to cause this huge vacuum. People are, ready to change their release dates based on, when GTA comes out. And, like, I just, you hear that, and it's like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. But you never actually hear, like, a developer or a publisher pretty candidly say, like, oh, no, like, it will legit F us. Like we will really take a beating from this if GTA came out around the same time. And I definitely don't see people doubling up on GTA 6 and Hotel Barcelona. Like, I just don't see that happening. So that was interesting to hear. Several other interesting little tidbits here and there. Not enough to get into here, but again, very interesting just to hear these guys talk. Swery was also a dude that was like, I was really expecting to be like a freaking weirdo, like just an absolute artistic nutball, but he was not at all. Like, he was a very cute, almost adorable little Japanese guy, and like very nice seeming guy, in my opinion, to a point where I was like, this is really kind of jarring. Suda51 is like kind of Rockstar-esque. You get that vibe playing his games. It's like, oh yeah, this guy's kind of hardcore, kind of hard, like Rockstar kind of dude, and like, he acts that way and he kind of looks that way, and it's like, yeah, he seems pretty cool. Like, I would get a beer with that guy, kind of dude. So it's just interesting, playing these guys' games over a long time and seeing their works and kind of getting a vibe for who they are off of that, and then actually seeing them in person is a really different experience. But I had a really good time at Momocon, had a really good time seeing these guys talk, and I found it a really fun experience to do that. But I will now get into the crux of the podcast, where we discuss the news. This past couple of weeks have been kind of insane in terms of news. Some very big stories, very big talking points that people have really kind of harped on, some of which I think are totally necessary and some of which I think are a little ridiculous. I actually had to pare the news down. I normally don't take out any news topics at all. Sometimes I'm wondering if, like, how I'm going to make the episode long enough, or, long enough. I mean, you look back at my catalog, every episode's freaking 2.5 to 3 hours, and I want it to be like an hour and a half. So, like, obviously that's never a problem. But, like, in this case, I was like, yeah, like, this was definitely something people were talking about at the beginning of the cycle, but, like, I don't really think it's that interesting. Could I have said something on it? Sure. But, like, I don't really need to. So, in that regard, we have several news topics to get into that I think are worth mentioning. The first up is an update. So I don't normally do this because there's not normally a problem with these, but literally the day I recorded, Giant Bomb has now become independent. In my last episode, I reported that Giant Bomb had pretty much been shut down. I mean, at the time, it looked like Giant Bomb was dead. A lot of the crew members were leaving, complaining about the corporate structure surrounding it. The corporate overlords behind it kind of were claiming, oh, we're looking into what to do with this particular brand at the moment. We're not really sure. Things looked really dire. And so I recorded an episode. I talked about how, like, yeah, Giant Bomb was kind of destined for this. There was no real way for this to work out. And then, of course, literally as soon as I finished recording the freaking episode, news drops. Oh, Giant Bomb has now become independent. It has been acquired by the personalities that were working on it. So Jeff Grubb and Jeff Gertzman, not Jeff Gertzman, but all the people that were currently working at Giant Bomb, they had purchased it from fandom. So that is the update now. This is what I would say is like the only avenue I could have possibly foreseen moving forward with Giant Bomb. I kind of spoke briefly about it last episode, but Jeff Gertzman, who is the original owner of and founder of Giant Bomb before it was sold off to, corporate overlords and kind of passed around over the years, kind of went into detail of why Giant Bomb was always something that over the past while was just like never really given attention and love that it deserved from a kind of a corporate structure. It's just very difficult to monetize. It's very difficult to see a large return on something like Giant Bomb in its size and its structure. And so like from a corporate perspective, it just never made sense. And like you would always have to be paying like the CEO, like a portion of your profits would always have to be going to like the CEO of CBS or whoever owned the brand at the time. And like that was just, it never made sense because Giant Bomb was never pulling in millions and millions of dollars every year. So sending a fraction of that to like help cover the CEO's cost, which like in their pay, which Giant Bomb really was never seeing any kind of benefit from as a brand, and then like also being put into structures where it was alongside like something like GameSpot, which corporate structures kind of favored. It was never getting the same amount of budget as other elements of the same company were, and it was always giving more back than it really could afford to. So like being independent, and I even kind of referenced this, I was like, as long as it's owned by a corporate structure, there's no future for this brand. Like there's absolutely I have no idea how it's lasted this long. Like you look at something like a Min-Max or a Kind of Funny or a Sacred Symbols, Last Stand Media, and you're like, okay, like these are smaller, more direct to consumer brands like Giant Bomb is, but they're so much smaller, they don't need a corporate structure. Like that doesn't make sense. So like now that we have this final, okay, now we're basically the same thing as all these other things that I just mentioned, it makes total sense now. Like this is something I can actually see surviving and thriving, maybe not doing as well as like these other brands. I mean, it is a legacy brand. I'm interested to see what Giant Bomb continues to do in the future. I really like Jeff Grubb and his reporting, so like I continue to stick around and listen to that. But I don't listen to like the Giant Bomb cast, which is kind of their flagship thing, or any of their other stuff. Like I really am just there for news and reporting. I'm not there for really much else. So like, are the personalities associated with it and their taste in games. Like I really don't identify with that very much. So I think there's a future here for Giant Bomb now. We'll see how they kind of make it their own and move forward. They're still kind of picking up the pieces and figuring out how to be independent now that they don't have a lot of the corporate structures that they had previously. But good for Giant Bomb. I'm happy that this thing that was so clearly dying possibly has a second breath at life. So moving on. Next up, another little smaller story before we really get into the meat and potatoes of the news here is Sony is ending PlayStation Stars. Very sad day here. So if you don't know what PlayStation Stars is, which you probably freaking don't because nobody used it, it is PlayStation's loyalty program, which I was very invested in. PlayStation's loyalty program, essentially, you could pay money. Any purchase you made, you would get points. Just like any loyalty program that you're probably aware of when you go to Starbucks or McDonald's or whatever the frick. I don't actually use fast food loyalty programs because I don't eat out too much, but, like, essentially, I know how they work. But, like, you get points, you can turn those in for basically money that you can use for more purchases for that particular thing, which for me was great. Like I could buy a game and then I could kind of get a discount on a future purchase. So that was really awesome. But the main thing that they were really trying to push that was different, because Microsoft and Nintendo no longer, they just shut down their Platinum Points program, or Gold Points. They still do Platinum Points. But like the money part of it, they just shut that down. But like Sony was kind of the only one without one for a long time, and so, or they did have one, but it was like PlayStation Rewards, which was part of Sony's rewards program, which was kind of combined with like their like hardware division and their movies division, and it was hard to get to and not very well done. They shut that down a while back too. But anyway, this one was like kind of locked to the PlayStation app, which I think was a really big no-no. They probably shouldn't have done that. But you could earn digital collectibles, not NFTs, just digital collectibles, even though NFTs would probably have been better. I am an NFT apologist. But like, ownership over them is essentially what I would be advocating for. But like you could get like, a 3D replica of like Kratos's weapons from God of War, or like pins of characters from Faces, or like just random freaking things like a bowl of ramen or something like that. And you would get those by playing games and using the program, or sometimes they would even be like, get this trophy in a game and then you'll get this particular collectible. And I loved that. I love the metagame. I love like trophies in general. So like I love being encouraged to get more value out of my video games, and maybe going and doing something that not everybody has done and being rewarded for that. Like I love that. It just gives me more bang for my buck. And in this instance, I was able to play a game and I would get money for it. Like they would give you points, or they would give you a collectible, which the collectible you couldn't get money for, but sometimes they would just give you points for like starting up a specific game. And like I would go into the app and the rewards program like on a regular basis and kind of check out these rewards and see if anything new had been added, and try and get the points as much as I could so I could redeem them for purchases. But the problem here is no one gave a frick. This thing was locked behind an app. It was not on the console at all, so you could not show off your collectibles to anybody unless they were also looking at your profile on the app, which makes no sense. I have no idea why that was the case. I don't know why you wouldn't just do it on both, but that's the way they decided to design it. I think it was a little bit obtuse in how to use it. You had to kind of dig through some menus in order to get to it, kind of fully understand what to do. You had to activate the rewards in order to actually get into it, and like do these like quests, quote unquote, to then get your rewards. A lot of the, there were some issues with it early on, some glitches, some technical issues I really had to kind of figure out and work through. Like you do a certain task and it wouldn't actually activate the reward or something like that. There were issues here and there. I just think that a lot of people didn't find these collectibles to be particularly enticing. I think that and it wasn't particularly advertised very well. And again, I think locking it to the app was really the death knell there. Again, I don't know why you don't just put it everywhere. Why put it on just the PlayStation app? I mean, I think the PlayStation app now is great, but that just seems like a problem. I think it's a real bummer to lose any rewards program, because why not just be rewarded for using a service? It actually encouraged me specifically to use PlayStation more. Like I would launch up my PlayStation just to get some, do some of those quests or get some of those collectibles. I would be, kind of if I was leaning on, maybe getting a game on Steam or maybe getting a game on PlayStation, I would, trophies already kind of make me lean towards PlayStation because I want the trophies, but because that's what I kind of associate with my score and my gamer score in general. But then I would also get the points, and I would also be able to get these digital collectibles, and it just seemed like it was a lot of fun to me. It was a lot of fun to me, and it was enough to tip the scales. I get nothing for that particular purchase on that platform, but I do get points for that, and I do maybe get a collectible for that. And sometimes a collectible would be really cool, and I'd be like, maybe I should consider buying that game so I can get that collectible. And there would be times on the collectibles, so you could only do it every, you only have 30 days to get this one. And it's like, oh, well, I wasn't really planning on buying this game day one, but I want that collectible. So and I don't think it ever really pushed me over the edge. I find myself a little bit harder to convince than that, but it definitely made me think about it. And that's kind of the goal, because I assure you, if I was thinking about it, other people just freaking did it. So, I think the rewards program had promise. It just was not executed well at all. And when they shut it down, or they're in the process of shutting it down, and I don't even care to tell everybody the details on that, because you didn't freaking use it. You're not using it right now. So why bother? Why bother? If you're still using it, continue to use it for the foreseeable future until, I think it's the end of the year. I think in November they shut it down. I guess if you happen to be one of those 5 people like me who actually used PlayStation rewards or PlayStation stars. But it's just a bummer. It's just a bummer. I love the collectible aspect of it. I love being rewarded for my purchases. So they said that they are in the process of trying to revamp the program and trying to figure out actually how to make people freaking use it. So we'll see. I would love to see that come back. I'm interested to see what they do. Apparently, I'll get to keep my collectibles, which I'm very happy about. So the death of PlayStation stars. We salute you. Pour one out for you, homie. PlayStation stars. Next up, this is where we actually get into the juicy bits of news. This one I think is a weird non-starter, but really blew up. And so I will talk about it. It is regarding our good friend, Randy Pitchford. Randy Pitchford, the head of Gearbox Studios, who you obviously know best for Borderlands. The looter shooter that is king of the crown when it comes to looter shooters. And obviously the head of Borderlands 4, the upcoming 2K game. So he went on Twitter, as most ridiculous news stories begin with. He went on Twitter, and a fan essentially asked, hey, what do you think Borderlands 4 is going to cost? Please don't make it $80, because I don't want to have to pay $80. And he says, A, not my call. B, and I quote, if you're a real fan, you'll find a way to make it happen. My local game store had Starflight for Sega Genesis for $80 in 1991 when I was just out of high school working minimum wage at an ice cream parlor in Pismo Beach, and I found a way to make it happen. Okay. So this is Randy Pitchford. I think we should start with kind of saying that. Randy Pitchford is a eccentric guy, as several studio heads in the video game industry are. Randy Pitchford is almost comically eccentric. He does a lot of weird things that he just really shouldn't do, and just kind of owns them in a really goofy way. The most infamous of which, I mean, he's literally, like, if you look at Randy Pitchford, he looks like a magician, like, and not like a magician like you'd see on, like, freaking a Penn and Teller show. Or he looks like a freaking magician you would hire at, like, a carnival or something. He looks like a D tier magician, like some sweaty dude who, like, didn't comb his hair and, like, is wearing a loose fitting suit that he can easily slide cards up. And, like, this is not by accident. This is because Randy Pitchford is, like, literally a magic obsessed dork. He loves magic and magic tricks, and, like, actively talks about that and attempts to promote that, like, interest very frequently. He not too long ago, or a few years back, was, like, caught essentially with pornography on a flash drive. He, like, left a flash drive at a airport with, like, basically, like, a bunch of company documents on it, and also a bunch of squirter porn that he had as well, and was eventually confronted about that and said that it was like magic because the women squirt so much, which is not something you would really want to hear the head of your company talk about, or really anyone like at all. So, like, this is like this is no surprise for Randy Pitchford that he just goes out and says stuff that he should not be saying. That being said, later on, he clarified his statements, essentially saying, hey, look, I'm not responsible for the price. I genuinely don't know what it's going to cost. Could be $80, could be $70, could be $100. Like, I don't know. I don't make that call. Like, that is 2K that makes that call. But, like, let's be real. Other development studios like Nintendo, which I don't think he directly calls out Nintendo, but I'm paraphrasing here. You know, other studios are essentially starting to charge more than $70. Like, people have opened the floodgates, and development costs are now way more expensive than they have been. Specifically, he references that, like, this Borderlands game, Borderlands 4, is more than double the development costs of what previous Borderlands games have been. So, like, they have to recoup costs somewhere, and the easiest way to do that is just increasing the price of games from $70 to $80. This is obviously coming off of the backs of Nintendo now charging $80 for Mario Kart World for the Switch 2 in just a couple of weeks, which is still surprising to me that that game comes out so soon. And obviously Microsoft saying that in the future all of their games will cost $80, which less people cared about because nobody cares about a lot of what Microsoft is making right now, and you can also just get a Game Pass subscription, and the vast majority of those costs will be consumed very, very quickly. So nobody really cared about that. But in general, clearly we see a massive shift in prices of games now being the norm of $80. So the way this was said originally on Twitter is just not the best way of saying this. Saying that only, like, a real fan will make it happen is tone deaf. I mean, I think tone deaf is, like, easily the best way of putting this. Maybe pretentious and douchey would be, like, the next best way of saying this. Like, obviously increasing the price of games is a necessary evil because, yes, inflation occurs and development costs for these games have become astronomical over time because bigger cost games simply are the games that gamers are drawn to and tend to make the biggest return. So, like, that's what most people are going to be developing, because that's what makes you the biggest return, and that's how capitalism works. Little indie games don't make billions of dollars in profit. Borderlands does, because it is a big AAA game. So, it is what it is. Yeah. This did not need to be said like this. I think it is odd, though, that people are reporting on this like crazy. I think a thing that gets swept under the rug very quickly is like, this didn't happen this week. This happened like 3 weeks ago, and that was because no one cared when he first said it. This was something that kind of blew up after the fact. It kind of was uncovered, and people were like, oh, like, we can probably get some clicks off of this headline of Randy Pitchford's, kind of saying this really rude, pretentious thing to a fan on Twitter. And so they did. And I think, this is Randy Pitchford doing a Randy Pitchford thing. He shouldn't have said what he said. He did what he did anyway. He's going to continue to do things like this, whether it be telling a fan that they are not a real fan unless they pay enough money, or telling people that he thinks that the liquid coming out of women's vagina is magical in terms of the voluminous amount. That's just Randy Pitchford. He's a freaking weirdo. He's just kind of a weird dork dude who clearly does and says things he probably shouldn't. So he'll continue to do that, though, and people will continue to talk about it because he's the head of one of the biggest and most successful studios in the gaming industry. That is what it is. But I do think that this is like a pretty understandable statement, just like not in the way that he's saying it. I do understand that development costs are going up. I do understand that, this is an inevitability. Doesn't mean I'm happy about it. Doesn't mean the vast majority of consumers are happy about it. And doesn't mean you need to, kind of phrase it in that way. So, I think this was kind of, in all honesty, a non-story that just kind of blew up because of Borderlands 4 is a big deal. Randy Pitchford's a big deal. Gearbox is a big deal. And this is like $80 games are a big deal right now. So, it's just kind of a recipe for clicks. Understandably so. Unfortunately so. And that's all I have to say about that. Next up, we finally get into the meat and potato. I feel like I've said that too many times. We finally get into the cool stuff. This is the actual stuff that I think is really worth talking about this week. Okay? So, PlayStation. They've had a couple of things happen that they probably aren't too happy about this week. We're going to start off with Jade Raymon leaves Haven Studios after underwhelming Fairgames reception. This is from VGC. In fact, most articles I'm quoting today are from VGC. Really love their work. But Jade Raymon, to give some background, she is one of the big female names in video games. She's a producer and technically a studio head and a few other different titles, but mainly a producer is really what we're kind of hitting on here. That's kind of her big meat and potatoes. I'm really hungry, I guess. I keep saying that. This is really her big kind of role that rose her to prominence. Specifically, she started at Ubisoft after producing the original Assassin's Creed. And then she moved on to be an executive producer on Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed Bloodlines, and Watch Dogs. Afterwards, so obviously those are all big games, and obviously just having Assassin's Creed 1 and 2 under your belt is going to have a big impact. These are some of the most successful games ever made, or one of the biggest IP ever created. Obviously, coming off of Watch Dogs, you can probably name your price. Watch Dogs wasn't actually that huge of a success comparative to Assassin's Creed, but it was a big IP at the time that a lot of people were interested in, for sure. So after that, she left Ubisoft and went to work on a very secret thing at a big studio, and that happened to be Google, which was Stadia. She was a big head of development at Stadia. We all know how that worked out. Stadia was obviously a horrendous flop, something that Google pulled the plug on pretty shortly after trying to get it up and running. I'm a big gamer guy. I mean, no way I was even coming close to touching Stadia. So obviously a massive flop there. She then founded Motive, which you may know for helping out with Battlefront 2 at EA. And then, they recently just made the Dead Space remake. So a fairly talented studio. The thing about this is she left Motive before they really produced anything. She founded it and bailed. Where did she go? Well, she went to start up a new studio, which was called Haven, which is where we are now. So Haven, obviously, was initially started working on Fairgames a long time ago, and was initially kind of put into, or not put into, but Sony put in a lot of money up front to kind of help found Haven, because of simply the notoriety of, well, Jade Raymon. She's working on this new studio, and don't you want to get in at the ground floor? And they did. And so eventually they were like, oh, well, we're making a live service game. And Sony was like, oh, we're kind of trying to make like 50 billion of those right now. Maybe we can just buy the studio. So that's what they did. They purchased Haven Studio, and now we come to the present. Jade Raymon leaves the studio. Fairgames, another one of Sony's big live service titles. It's been shown off, kind of had a teaser trailer a while back. Reception to it was fine. It was clearly like I think it had a little bit of pushback because it was trying to incorporate NFTs, monkey mask kind of deal. But people really didn't know much about it until very recently, where the game had an external playtest for the first time, and this was apparently received with horrific turnaround. Nobody liked it. It was a mostly negative feedback from Fairgames initial external playtest. It seems as if this is a direct correlation to her departure from the studio. Is like, this game is clearly in dire straits. Nobody likes it. And yeah, you probably need to leave. Like this is definitely a direct correlation. And we kind of had a little bit of have heard some reports on exactly what the game was. It's a battle, or is, I guess. It hasn't been canceled yet. So it's a battle royale / extraction shooter where essentially you're going through maps and looting bank vaults. And, there's PvP, PvE action. So, while you're looting these vaults, people also can try to loot the vaults and kill you and take the stuff and so on and so forth. But, also battle royale in a way, I suppose. What ultimately matters is the game was not fun. It was considered incredibly clunky. It was kind of a cross between the Division and I think Fortnite in some way. It ultimately just didn't feel very good to play. It was not fun at a fundamental level. Losing your studio head and immediately have an external playtest say this is not working is a really bad look and means this game is in dire straits. This is kind of the topic around this one is Jade Raymon, is she just a total washed up hack? Did she ever have any talent here? You can have a guy or gal in this instance, have the name recognition behind, a big project, and then quickly realize that, yeah, maybe this ain't the thing. Maybe she was not the magic sauce. It was something else. She just kind of lucked out. And at this point, a lot of people are like, well, yeah, she had nothing to do clearly with the success of all of these previous things, because everything else she's done has completely had nothing, any success of anything that she has been a part of. She wasn't even there for the success. She was hardly there for building it up in the first place. And then obviously Google completely failed. And now, Fairgames is it's not a complete failure yet, but like, let's be real, like this is obviously not going to pan out. Bro, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. From a producer title, I don't know how you get this much recognition, to be quite frank. To get so much recognition that, like, you're poached by Google, you're given incredible power on an entire platform by one of the biggest companies in the world. You're then starting a new studio, and before you really even start working on anything, you're basically acquired by, again, another one of the biggest video game publishers in the world. You worked on all these big games over at another big publisher, but I've always been confused as to exactly what a producer is doing, and exactly like how influential a producer is to the final product of a game. Not to say producers are not, or a movie, or really anything, not to say producers are not important, and not to say that I have absolutely no clue what a producer is, but I think you can be a very talented producer, and you can be a not very talented producer, and still your project can be either good or bad. It just depends, like, you can work for Tommy Wiseau and, like the guy who directed The Room, and be a very talented producer, but it doesn't matter if the director of your project sucks and the script sucks and everything else around it is bad. Like, you can still be a talented producer and it can still be really, really bad. And like, the same can happen in reverse. Like, you can be a really untalented producer and you can also completely have everybody else around you carry the project. So I have no idea. She must be very charismatic to have gotten this kind of recognition and this kind of acknowledgement, considering everybody has kind of said at this point, yeah, I don't know about this. But, then you also have, and I feel like nobody is bringing this up, but like, and I understand why, but like, you have like somebody like Amy Hennig. Yeah, I'm going to say it. Amy Hennig. What has she done recently? Frickin' nothing. So Amy Hennig is another very, very prominent female talent within the video game industry. You know her best for probably her work on Uncharted. She was the lead writer on Uncharted 1, 2, and 3. She also did Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver. There were, several very classic, very well-regarded games that she's worked on, and, like, you may be thinking, Uncharted 3 came out a while ago, what's been going on? Well, like, everything she's worked on since then has been canceled. She was working on a Star Wars game at EA, it got canceled. Now she's working at, she's working on a Marvel game. I think another game she was working on got canceled as well. But like, it's just been a while since she's done anything. But that's because a lot of her projects got freaking canceled. But just because you haven't done anything in a while doesn't necessarily mean that you're not talented. Like, this looks a little bit more like, yeah, maybe this is her fault. Like, she's the head of the studio. So it's she's the founder, at least. So like, it does look like, yeah, what the frick were we ever hyping this bick up about? Like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I don't know if that's necessarily the conversation that needs to be had here. I think the conversation that needs to be had is, the frick is going on with PlayStation's live service initiative? This is another dead one. This is another one, right? They've had several get canceled. They've had several come out, obviously Concord and fail, and this is another one that is clearly in dire straits. And, you have your head leave, you have a bunch of negative tests, and it's like, okay, well, there probably isn't a way to turn this around, which leads us to our second topic, which is a doozy. Oh, holy guacamole, it's a doozy. So there's a lot of elements to this, but it ties in well because it primarily focuses on Marathon, the other big PlayStation live service game by Bungie. Well, let's just go into this. Bungie pulls gameplay and reviews all game art after confirming plagiarism within Marathon. So this started off a while back. Like over a week ago, it started off. And it's kind of been an ongoing story for a while. But this is a pretty egregious freaking story for many reasons. And it kept going and going and going. And I was like, oh man, this is really, we're just dogpiling at this point. But let's start off from the top here. So an artist known as Anti-Real posted on Twitter and essentially said, hey, I was kind of looking at some of the Marathon art and I noticed this is pretty similar to some stuff that I've done, and it was very similar. If you go through the posts that they made, you will see that it is just copy and pasted. Like, there is no denying. It is really cut and dry, like plagiarism, 110%. So, like, it was pretty red-handed, like, caught in the act plagiarism. So this led the director of Marathon and the art director of Marathon to do a live stream on YouTube and Twitch, I think. I actually don't know what platforms. But, like, they did a live stream. And they said, hey, we're going to address this. We're going to talk about the issue at hand. And they were like, yeah, we plagiarized. 100%. We take full responsibility here. This is definitely plagiarism. We took this guy's art. And essentially addressed, hey, we have made good with this guy. We've contacted Anti-Real, the artist that we stole art from. We're doing everything we can to, like, kind of make it okay and smooth things over. We are going to be doing a full overhaul. We are going to be, auditing the entire game, going back and checking all the art. And the guy who put this art in there in the first place, dude's out. Like, he has not been with the company for years, which means they didn't fire him. He left, or maybe they fired him, but he was let go a while back, or left a while back, regardless. So they just now caught it. Now that the artist is pointing this out, 4 months away, almost less than 4 months away from launch. And now they're going to have to go back through and do a complete audit and change, and alter all art that was possibly stolen. During this live stream, people were not very kind. The chat was spammed with negative comments. Specifically, ones that I pulled out that I thought were nice were, I'd plagiarize a good comment, but there were none. And plagiarism will make me God. These were typically spammed in all caps, as you would normally when trying to be annoying in a Twitch chat, and, ad infinitum. So, yeah, people were definitely not happy about this. So, here we are. We've now got Bungie being accused of plagiarism, which I should note is not the first time this has happened. Bungie has in the past been caught for plagiarizing art within their games, which is kind of even crazier considering that this happened again, that they were caught again plagiarizing art, which is just kind of insane. You think it happens once, you then put in the freaking rail guards that you need to make sure it doesn't happen again, right? So, okay. Now, we have blood in the water. This is essentially, now everybody's looking at Marathon. This game already did not have, like, the best sentiment behind it, right? So, like, playtests were done, like public playtests were done. There was an alpha that came out a while back that was kind of given to, like, influencers and people within the industry to try out. You could even film your own footage, and there's a lot of it out there now that you can kind of check out. And the general consensus around Marathon was, I think this could be cool, but right now they really need to work on it and tweak it, and maybe it will be ready before launch. Which is a really not kind of reception you want to a Bungie shooter and like in a live service like landscape that you are competing so ferociously with Apex Legends, Fortnite, Roblox, like all of these things that people are already committed to and are going to be difficult to pull away from in general. Like, you need a hit. Like, you don't need people being like wishy-washy about this. And really, I mean, like, I talked about this a few episodes back in the marathon reveal, and I was like, bro, I don't know why people are giving Bungie so much good graces right now. Like people were basically like, look, the only reason I'm really interested in this game at all is because it's a Bungie game, and like I think I have enough faith in Bungie to really pull this one out and turn it around. And I'm like, bro, I don't know what you've been looking at, but like Bungie has had a lot of problems recently, like a lot, and they've had a lot of problems for a long time. And they're not a very consistent studio in that way. And like, I know Bungie has a lot of really dedicated fans, and you know, like people love Destiny 2 when they love it, and they also kind of hate it when they hate it a lot. You know, like I really can never get a very good grasp on whether Destiny 2 is actually a good game or a bad game, and if I should play it or if I shouldn't, because the community is so often fickle with it. But anyway, you know, I was like, what the frick are you guys talking about? I don't know why you guys are giving Bungie so much good faith. Well, apparently this plagiarism thing was like enough for people to tip the scales and be like, yeah, I don't know about this. I smell blood in the water with this game. People's sentiment went from like, okay, cool, a new Bungie shooter, I'm in, to, okay, reception behind this game has been kind of lukewarm. I'll wait and see. Hopefully they can fix it. To, okay, now Bungie's just kind of being a bunch of a-holes. I don't want to support this game at all. Like, I have plenty of games to play, which you would be surprised how often I hear people say that. You don't normally hear that, honestly. Like, people aren't saying that about, like, Borderlands 4. Like, nobody's like, oh, I just got too many games to play. I don't really need another Borderlands. Like, I'll pass. Like, nobody's saying that. Like, people are like, I got too many games to play. I don't really need to play a freaking mid-Bungie shooter that's plagiarizing art. Like, you know, like, that's kind of crazy to, like, see people turn on this game so significantly. So, I'm not going to say quickly, but, like, Bungie has a lot of goodwill and a lot of, like, very hardcore fans. From their time, obviously, with Halo and with Destiny, which consumed a lot of people's lives in various ways. So it's really crazy to see people being like, nah, I'm not even going to touch this freaking game. I got other things to do. Like, that's kind of freaking crazy. And with that happening, we then started seeing a bunch of stories, like the devs from Bungie, which is weird. Bungie has this kind of relationship, but Bungie essentially, like, is known, if you talk to people really hardcore in the Bungie community, it's pretty well known that like the management behind Bungie is god awful, and the developers are actually like the really talented people. But that just doesn't make sense to me, because if their management is that bad, what the frick are the developers still doing there that make these games good? Like, why? Why do you stick around at a studio that you apparently like hate the management of? And I can only imagine it's the prestige or something like that comes along with the name like Bungie. But like, that's when a bunch of articles started coming out. Forbes reports Bungie's morale is now in freefall. Everyone working on this game has now pretty much given up on it. They're like, yo, there is no way this game is going to succeed. People aren't liking it. You know, like there's a lot of bad mojo around it. People aren't happy with the plagiarism stuff, understandably so. And like, it's like, bro, I don't think this game's going to do well. I'm working on a dead project. I'm working on a game that is walking into an early grave. There is no way this game is going to fly. And that's horrific to hear, because you don't want to see that on a game that's still in active freaking development and is a live service game that needs people who care about it to continue to develop it. That's not good. And then another report comes out that says that freaking Destiny 2 was considered to, like, the management behind Destiny 2 was considering a subscription service for Destiny 2 before devs behind the game vehemently shot it down. And we're not talking like, oh yeah, let's make a freaking battle pass. Like, let's make a monthly subscription to like a battle pass or something. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about straight up, like, you pay $20 just to get into the game a month or whatever the frick, which is insane in this climate. It would have never freaking flown. The only game that I can even imagine still getting away with that is World of Warcraft, and it's because people are addicted to it, and there's like no way they're gonna freaking stop playing it at this point. Like, I don't know why some MMOs get away with that subscription model still today. Like, obviously it's a legacy thing. If any MMO came out today, it would be free to play, but it would also be designed differently. It would be designed with a free to play landscape in mind. So it is what it is. But anyway, so it just kind of couples in with like, well, now we have the Destiny community pissed off at us because management's talking about basically screwing them over and trying to milk them for cash, so they're not happy. And so like, this is now we are having even more reports that marketing for this game, Marathon, has completely come to a stop. There are overseas markets that are now reporting that they have no plans on marketing the game at the moment, and this game is set to release in September. So this is not a good sign. This is a sign that we are looking at a hardcore delay. We are looking at, like, there's no way they're canceling it. But, like, I think we're looking at a delay, or we're looking at, like, this is really bad news. Like, they have no confidence in this game. They are considering this to be another walking Concord, which is, bro, if you had told me that Bungie was going to put out a game that would be comparative to Concord in any way, I'd say you were insane. There's no way that Bungie is going to put out a game that anybody would consider a Concord level failure. And I think right now, like I was saying, blood is in the water. Is this Bungie's fault? Does this mean Bungie is not worth their salt? Are they overhyped? Are they overrated? What is going on here? I have been a vocal person that says, like, yeah, Bungie is not as good as people continuously try to make them out to be. This is a legacy studio with a large legacy of success, in creating some of the tentpole games in some of the most important sectors of the gaming industry. They obviously made Halo, which is the only reason that Xbox ever existed beyond the Xbox. Without Halo, that entire console would have died, and you would not have an Xbox brand today. You're losing the Xbox as we speak. Currently it is dying a very slow death, but it is like the reason that brand ever was successful at all. And then they obviously made Destiny, which is like the godfather of all live service games. Like, it is the reason live service games exist. Or not the reason per se, but it laid the foundation for live service games, which is now like the dominant genre in terms of money-making games out there. So, it is hard to deny Destiny's legacy, and the consistent quality or I'm not going to say consistent quality, but the consistent influence that they have had over the video game industry for decades. Obviously, Destiny or Bungie is a very important studio historically. Has Bungie made the best moves in the past, I don't know, decade since the launch of Destiny? No, absolutely not. You can ask any Destiny fan. They have made many, many, many errors in the development of Destiny and Destiny 2 specifically and its expansions. You can ask Sony, who bought Destiny and, like pretty much has gotten nothing out of that, who, like has leaned on their expertise for live service games, and like, what have they gotten out of it? A canceled Last of Us game, and that probably was going to be a success no matter what. And like Concord continuing to be developed and pushed to market, and like Marathon, which is now looking to be an absolute flop, and like I guess that new studio that's doing the Frog game, like that's pretty much it. Gummy Bears, like that's pretty much it. What did 2K get from Destiny? Or from Bungie? They did not like it. If Destiny was not making money enough so that 2K was happy, and they let Bungie go. They bought Bungie and then let them go. Like, clearly, this studio has issues. Now we have consistent, like, reports that that Bungie has had managerial issues for years. Developers are not happy for years. Like developers are now actively going to media to report they're not satisfied. Like it's this studio. I cannot look at it right now and be like, yeah, Bungie's good. Bungie's absolutely one of the most legendary and best developers ever. I can't do that. I would honestly say that Halo was overhyped for the time. I don't know why it was particularly considered one of the best first-person shooters ever. And I genuinely think it was just in the right place at the right time when Xbox Live was invented. And, it was one of the big first online shooters that everybody could really get into. And, now we know that Halo isn't doing very well under Microsoft's management. That has nothing to do with Bungie, admittedly. But, clearly the Halo brand wasn't something that was eternal. Like the things that made Halo good clearly were not long-lasting. I still don't really know why people don't like Halo Infinite now. They seemed to like it when it released and then immediately turned on it, so I have no idea what the frick happened there. But I've never been I've played all the Halo games, and I've never been like enamored with them. I don't know why people are like, this is one of the best games ever. People even like the story behind that game, and I'm like, I don't like the story at all. It's pretty meh. Destiny is a game that I consistently hear people say either they love or they hate, and those are the same people that say they love it and hate it. So I don't know what to really gather about that game, but I don't know. It's hard for me to legitimately evaluate Bungie and be like, yo, yes, I understand they made a massive impact on the video game space. Do I think that they are as good as people continually try to make them out to be? No. And I think that this is just piling and piling and piling. Is this the straw that broke the camel's back? I think people are finally looking at Bungie and saying, yeah, no. I ain't about it. Do I think that this is a possible turnaround? Is it possible to turn around for Bungie and specifically Marathon at all? Yeah. Yeah, I do. I think that, if they legit try to put this thing back in the oven for a while, it could possibly be saved. Right? I think, these controversies are not anything to the gaming public. I think that we will, in a week, not give a frick about this. I think the vast majority of consumers and hardcore gamers even, as long as the game is good, will not care about this at all. I think this is just a lot of bad press hitting this game really hard right now. And what really matters is the game fun. And right now, the consensus is it's okay. And you cannot survive in the live service industry with an okay game, even if you have the name and prestige of Bungie behind it. I said that when it was initially revealed, and people are finally starting to agree with me, and I appreciate that because I am always freaking right. But yeah, I think this spells doom and gloom for PlayStation's live service game initiative. This is 2 games, Marathon and Fairgames, that you would have expected to be good. You would have expected that Sony was putting a lot of stock into. They bought an entire studio for Fairgames, and they didn't buy Bungie for Marathon, but like they bought Bungie for their live service game and their expertise around that industry and market, and this is what they're producing. A game that seems to be walking to the gallows. Like, it is kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy to see, and I'm interested to see what comes out of this in 3 months. Will we see a delay? Will we see massive retuning around the game that will save it? Will we see this continued sentiment that people are still not happy with it and still don't care about it? I'm interested to see. Only time will tell. If I had to guess, I'm thinking a little bit of the first 2. And depending on how that goes, the third. I think that if the game is retuned, it will depend how the game is retuned, and if people like the retuning, maybe they'll make it perfect. Doom 2016 did that, and people were cool with it. If not, if we don't get a delay, the delay could be in tandem with obviously the tuning, but I think if none of that happens, then the sentiment will remain. I don't think people will forget this, and you're also going to continue to put out a mid-game. People aren't going to forget that. People are going to continue to see that, obviously, when the game releases. But this is clearly another day, another dollar for Sony to be spending on this live service initiative that is clearly flopping hard on its face. So many of these games have failed. I know that Sony was really just looking for 1 to succeed, or 2. Helldivers 2 was not the one I think they thought was going to be the success, and I don't think it made as much money as they were hoping for this live service initiative, which they were hoping something like Fortnite was going to come out of it, or Apex Legends, and that's not what Sony is getting. They're getting a bunch of disappointing releases that they all thought were going to be big. Specifically Concord, now we're looking at Marathon, and we're going to see Fairgames shortly after. So, like, this is just... I know whoever signed off on that, which, Ryan was the dude who signed off on it, is kicking themselves. Or whoever said it was okay to do it, I guess, now, because he's gone. But, you get it. This is just not looking good. But that's, for the time being, I'm sure we will have more to say as time progresses. But the time being, all we have for the news. There were several other things in the news that I X'd off. One was Fortnite coming back to iOS. Genuinely think the legal ramifications around that is really interesting. But it would take a while. It would take a while to go into. And I've had a busy weekend, and I'm already kind of losing my voice a little bit. So I nixed that one, and then I also nixed the head of the Ori and the Blind Forest studio. He came out and said, like, review bombs essentially would kill a studio in kind of a eccentric and unhinged way. And that was also a big topic of discussion about 2 weeks ago. Since we do an episode every 2 weeks, it was topical at the time. But I think Randy Pitchford's comments kind of got a little bit more attention and were a little bit more recent. So I just kind of stuck with them, and I was like, I don't really need two unhinged developers saying crazy things back to back in the same episode. We're good. We're good on that. I think we met the quota. So that was the news. Could have gone for 3 hours, I'm sure, if I added those two. But anyway, impressions. Everybody's favorite. So kind of jumped around a lot. So I obviously finished Clair Obscure. That was the first thing I did, obviously, when I put down the podcast 2 weeks ago. Went and I finished that up. But in the meantime, I'll get into that in a second, but in the meantime, Doom the Dark Ages came out. Game Pass, got it for free, so I get it day one, no extra cost. Played it, or I played the first chapter of it, and I put it down. And this is coming from somebody who thinks Doom 2016 is like one of their favorite first-person shooters ever. One of the best first-person shooter campaigns ever, for sure. And didn't really love Doom Eternal. But, like, Dark Ages came out, and I was like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot. And then the reviews started dropping for it, and it was, like, kind of mixed. Like, the reviews on Metacritic, I think, landed on, like, an 85. But, like, in terms of the conversation around this game, it's been really lukewarm. It's been like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't really like this game that much. Like, I've really heard a lot of Debbie Downer sentiment around this game. And it's been around, like, they changed a lot around the combat, and which every one of these Doom games have done. But they were like, yeah, it's really not, it's not Doom 2016, and it's not Doom Eternal. And, like, both of those audiences are very different. And I think that's what the issue you're going to have when you change your combat in these games so drastically from iteration to iteration is like, well, you're really going to just piss off the audience that you've built for each game. Like, you know, like Doom 2016 is an audience, and that's me. Doom Eternal is an audience, which is a super hardcore boomer shooter audience. And then you have Doom the Dark Ages, which is really for neither one of those audiences. And you're like, okay, well, who is this for? What are we really trying to do here? What's going on? And that's kind of where we're at. It's like, I played the first stage and I was like, yeah, like, this is fine, but like, the conversation around this game has already kind of died. Nobody seems to really be enjoying it that much. Like, everybody's just kind of begrudgingly playing it. They're like, I really liked either Doom or Doom Eternal, and like, I just feel like I should play this game. And I was like, if there's really nothing here that's like that awesome, why would I be wasting my freaking time? Like, why would I waste my time on this? Normally, I would waste my time on a big release if there were a lot of people talking about it, and a lot of people talking about it, like, if it was really, really good, maybe even if it was really, really bad, but, like, I really don't feel the need to waste my time on a game that everybody's like, this is fine, but everybody's playing it. Like, this game has already hit 3 million active users, which is great, but, like, if it's mid, who cares? Like, you know, like, I don't know. Like, I think I'd just rather go back and play Doom 2016, to be frank. And, you know, maybe I'll go back and I'll play a couple more stages of Doom the Dark Ages, but, like, I don't know. Like, the first stage didn't grab me. It didn't grab me, and I've heard the rest of the game really won't either. So I'm like, okay, I think I'm good, you know? I think I'll just drop it. I got plenty of other things to play. I got plenty of other things to get to, just kind of like people who said that with Marathon. And I think I'm just gonna maybe, you know, if the mood arises, I'm genuinely more interested in going back and replaying and playing and finishing up South of Midnight, which, like, nobody liked. You know, like, I actually thought that game was, like, pretty interesting at the very least, and like, it was pretty short, which is why I really would prefer to go back and play it. Doom the Dark Ages is like 20 hours, and I'm like, for a freaking first-person shooter campaign, that's pretty lengthy. And I was like, I don't know, I really want to do this for 20 hours. Like, maybe, you know, consider it in the future, but not right now. So that's my thoughts on Doom the Dark Ages. We'll see if maybe I go back to that, but at the moment, I got bigger and better things to do, bigger fish to fry around here. Which, specifically, speaking of the biggest fish out there, we got Clair Obscure, Expedition 33. Finished it, beat it, rolled credits, did not do hardly any of the extra stuff after the game, or before the game ends. We'll get to that in a second. I'll get into that in a little bit. But really enjoyed it. Obviously, but this is why I don't like talking about games until I finished them. So I tried to make an effort to fully play through a game before finishing it, or before talking about it on the podcast, because this is not the first time this has happened, but my opinions of a game can shift even when I'm halfway through a game, or, you know, a third of the way, or whatever the frick. They can go from being, oh, this game's fine, or whatever, to like, oh no, I really like this game. Like I finally got the loop. I finally figured out what it was about. The story took a really interesting turn that really turned me onto it. Like sometimes, especially in shorter narrative games, you will have a twist at the end of the narrative that like really brings everything together. And you're like, oh dang, this is actually a really cool idea, and like it really makes the whole game and everything that's happened up to this point really come together and become something really greater than the sum of its parts. And like that's why I don't want to come on the podcast and freaking talk about a game, because then I have a whole episode where I'm like, oh, I really freaking don't like that, and it's like, then I freaking come back on the next episode and I'm like, it's like my favorite game ever, and it's like, okay, that just seems a little disjointed to me, and it makes me feel like I was just talking. I was like maybe giving people the wrong impression that I really shouldn't have when I first started talking about it, yada, yada, yada. Just makes me look dumb, right? That's the main bullet point there. Just makes me look like a big dummy. So I don't like doing it. But I decided to try and start kind of doing that because, like it's a lot. It's a lot to try and beat an entire game before every episode. So like, especially if it's a longer game, which I might get into. I started another game after Clair Obscure. I don't know if I'm going to talk about it yet. We'll get to it in a bit if so. But Clair Obscure, okay? Last time I talked about this game, this is the big game right now. Everybody's talking about it. This is literally people, I hear this more often than I would think I would for a game like this, but people are like, dude, this is one of my favorite games of all time. This is one of the best games ever made. This game is incredible, absolutely mind-blowing. I love it more than life itself. And like that's very much a very positive reception to a game when people are saying that. And I went on the podcast last week and I was like, I don't know if I really love this game that much. I mean, it's cool. It's cool. Like, I really can't say anything super bad about it. Like, it's not like there's nothing wrong with it. Maybe it's just not for me or something, but like I just am not really in love with it or anything. It's a good game, but like people are talking about it and it makes me feel like I'm just not experiencing the same thing they are, because they're freaking talking like it's the second coming of Christ, and I'm sitting here like, bro, I mean, it's a good game. And it's like, it makes me feel freaking stupid. Like they see something I don't, and like everybody's saying that, and I feel freaking dumb. So like, and I was going to be honest about that on the podcast for sure. I'm not going to sit here and freaking say this game's the most amazing thing ever and be like, I don't actually believe that, like, so, I think I was probably just past Act 1 when I had finished talking about it on the podcast last time. And so there's 3 acts to the game. And like, there's a big twist at the end of Act 1. There's really a big twist at the end of every act. And there's a big twist at end of Act 1. And I had heard it was going to make me cry. It was the saddest thing ever. Like, oh my gosh. And I saw it and I was like, no, I mean, it's fine. I was like, yeah, I mean, like, that's interesting, certainly, like, that we decided to do that. And, like, the way we try to move forward from that is really interesting. And, like, I understand why people like that twist. And that's really cool that they did that. And can't wait to see more. And, but I wasn't, like, I wasn't receiving it the same way that everybody else was. I was like, I wasn't freaking beside myself like I freaking saw this conversation being for the end of Act 1. And I still even look back at that and I'm like, yeah, I mean, it was a good twist, but like, it wasn't like nothing. I mean, it certainly could have been better. Like, I've definitely seen people, games and media approach that kind of a twist in a much more impactful way, at least to me. So I was like, yeah, I mean, it was a good twist, but it wasn't like this monumental thing. And so like, I was talking about the gameplay and I was like, yeah, it's good gameplay. I really can't argue with it. It's fine. There's some really good stuff here and, like, it's cool. And then, I was talking about the story and the characters. I was like, they're okay. I really did like the story, at least the concept. I really loved the concept behind it. The intro to the game was fantastic. But like, like I was not sitting here glazing the game. I was like, it's really good, but it's not my favorite game ever. It's good. I have played and beat the game, and I will say it's definitely my favorite game of the year so far. And I'm going to emphasize that so far. I have not played every game that has come out this year. There's freaking 7 more months of the year to go. So, there is plenty of time for another game to come along and sweep me off my feet. But absolutely, this is my favorite game of the year. It is a really, really great game. It finally clicked with me. Pretty much everything that I was like, yeah, it's cool. I'm like, no, it's actually really good. Okay, it's just really good. Basically, I finally got to Act 3, and that's when the game actually frickin' sold me on it. Pretty much Act 2, and it's weird how the game is structured as well. So Act 2 is really the bulk of the game. Act 1 is kind of the intro to it. Act 2 is the rising action, and then, Act 3 is the climax, but Act 2 is the bulk of it. It's if the game is 30 hours, Act 2 is probably 20 of those hours. It's a very, very large percentage of the game. And Act 3 is comprised of really 2 things. The final boss, which you can go to immediately after starting Act 3, and all optional content. So at the end of the game, you're given the ability to fly around the map, and when you do that, you're basically unlocking an entire level of new content that you can explore. Secret bosses, hidden missions, things that you can do that are just completely optional, and this blew me away. It was, and this is all end game stuff really, but the weird thing about it is you can't beat the game and come back to the open world at all. So you cannot have beaten the final boss before you go up against all these in-game bosses. But essentially this combat in these areas and stuff are really difficult. They're really hard. And you will eventually, in order to beat the final boss, I actually have a cousin who really got into the game, and he was talking to me about it, and he was like, look, I love the game, but that final boss, you genuinely cannot beat it unless you break the game. You have to absolutely use these, throughout the game, you can use some strats that produce some really crazy damage numbers. And he's like, well, there's ways you can deal freaking 40 million damage a hit. And that's crazy to me because I never got even close to that. But he's like, you can deal 40 million damage a hit, but you have to be able to do that if you want to beat the final boss, the final secret boss. And in order to do that, you will have to really do some cheesy tactics, and that's intended to beat the game. And I thought that was really cool, and I really love that. And I really wouldn't mind if there was a bigger and better incentive in the game to do that. There's another several hours of content. When I say several, I think I've heard it's upwards of 20 hours of content that you can really do, 20 to 30, I think, in that end-game, post-game kind of scenario. But in Act 3, the game's themes, the game's characters, the gameplay, the world, and so much more come together in a substantial and impressive way that wowed me. People, I feel are talking about this game's characters, and they're like, oh, I love the characters. Bro, vast majority of the characters never get enough interest to me. I'll go ahead and say that. You have, pretty much Mael and, not going to say, but the other main protagonist of the game, he and she are basically the only characters that really get focus and have a lot of really interesting motivations and lore and conversations that really mean something towards the end of the game. Your other party members are just set dressing. You even have you have loyalty missions towards the end of the game that you can do, and one of them doesn't even have one. One of your companions does not even have a loyalty mission that goes along with their story, their character arc at all. And I'm like, oh, okay, why is this character even here? It seems like the developers didn't even care about her. The other one is like just a boss fight. Like, it's just a boss fight, an optional boss fight you can do. And then you have Mael, whose freaking character, like, loyalty mission is like an entire extra area with so much effort put into it, and a lore specific boss that like ties up elements of the story if you do it. And I'm just like, why are we acting like these other cast members are even worthy of being here? Like, that's crazy. You know, like, I can't believe that we're acting like these other cast members are even like interesting comparative to the other cast, which is really a small subset of the cast that are very, very, very interesting. But like, up until that point, I didn't care about any of them. Like, I didn't particularly think Mael was very interesting in terms of her character or motivations until Act 3. I didn't think the main male protagonist was very interesting in terms of his, motivations or character until Act 3. I didn't think that I never really thought that like somebody like Lunar or whatever the frick her name was, and CL were very interesting for the entire game. Like, they never have this big moment that makes them very likable or lovable or interesting in terms of what's going on in the game. Like, they never really do, comparative to these other characters that clearly were the stars of the game. Like, so, but those characters did get fleshed out more. I don't even think those characters get any fleshed out at all within Act 1 and 2. Like, they're just kind of around. In Act 3, they actually do get a little bit of that. I think, like, the game's themes obviously come together. Grief. There's a big twist that turns the world on its head for like a 5th time, which is great. I love when that happens. I love the climax of the game. I love where the story goes. It touched me. Didn't literally touch me, but it touched me, like, my heart. It pulled at my heartstrings. It made me think. It was genuinely well written. All of these little, like, strings that had been left hanging that I was like, there's no way they're going to address that. It's like, no, they do. Like, if you fully explore what this game has to offer, you will find answers to every question that this game has ever asked. And I love that. The gameplay really finally starts to show its full colors. You're finally starting to, like, I remember at the beginning of the game, I didn't have a lot of confidence. And so I was like, I'm going to dodge everything because I don't know that you can either dodge or parry. Dodge has like a longer window to, fully like miss damage, and parry has a shorter window. And so like at the beginning of the game, I was like, I can't freaking afford to get hit. I'm just going to dodge. I was also playing on Game Pass streaming the game. So like my window also sucked in general, depending on how my Wi-Fi was doing that day. But like I just started parrying. And I was like, parrying is actually a really valuable thing. Like, your parrying attacks are, like, really powerful. Like, I should really start trying to utilize that more. And I did. Instead of trying to dodge, I only parried. I never dodged again. After I got used to parrying, I only ever parried. And I was like, holy frick, okay. And then, like, I started trying out different tactics with my party, switching it up, and, like, trying to build damage in interesting ways. And I was like, I really got into the combat. And I was, of course, as you level up, you get more options to do that. So like the combat really started clicking for me towards the end of the game. And like, holy frick, I loved it. I loved every bit of it. Again, I think it's a fantastic ending segment, fantastic soundtrack, great story, great characters, great themes, great world, great exploration. Love the optional content that's in this game. Really respect the amount of optional content that's in the game. dang, like the game really blew me away in that last act. And I still say that like the game's act 1 and 2 are both really good. Are they as good as people were saying they were? I don't think so. But that's because they were saying it's like one of the best things ever freaking made. But like I think Act 3 really blew me away. It really blew me away. It really made me really respect the game and fall in love with it. Like before that, I was just like, yeah, this game is really, really good. It's really, really good. It's great. I really don't have anything bad to say about it. But it's really not resonating with me in a way that I feel like it is with everybody else. Which is kind of where we have this really interesting conversation, right? So I've now said this game is really, really good. Is it one of the greatest of all time? As I initially alluded to people saying at the beginning of this conversation, highly doubtful, I think is the best way of saying this. If you are genuinely and unironically saying Clair Obscure is one of the greatest games of all time right now, immediately after you beat it, you are insane. I think you are riding a wave of hype right now. This game has an excellent narrative. And by narrative, I mean optics, right? This game was created by a small indie studio that was trying to make something original after leaving a big studio, aka Ubisoft. It had everything really going against it. Nobody really thought this game was going to be very good before it came out. And bada bing, bada boom, it comes out and it is universally praised in almost every way. It has studio members that are literally picked off of forums because the director thought they were talented. A writer that was found from his work from like Reddit posts. Like this is a story. This is a narrative that is impressive. It's impressive. It is an underdog story. It is something that you cannot really shoot down, and you really do want to support it fully, right? You want to be one of the guys championing the underdog. And, it is an incredibly, and I have to emphasize that, incredibly impressive game for the studio and the size of the studio that worked on it. To say this game is perfect is obviously a stretch. I think, there are elements of this game that people are incredibly praising way more than they should be. Like, you would think that no one has ever done an active turn-based system in their lives. Like, this is the very first game to ever think of that. Hello? Did you know that I played Paper Mario and the 1,000-Year Door last year? And you know what that game had? An active turn-based battle system. Isn't that crazy? And that game came out like 20 years ago. And did you know that it wasn't the first game that did that? Yeah, it wasn't. It's crazy. That's insane. Isn't that weird? But you would think that this game is the only game that's ever done that. Like, people are like, yo, bro, it's like a turn-based game, but it's like not. It like feels like it's not a turn-based game. And like, while I get that and I agree with that, and I think like every turn-based game should have some kind of system like that makes you not feel like you are just sitting and waiting for the game to actually do something and like be bored out of your mind. Like, while I certainly agree with that, to be like, yo, Clair Obscure is like the only game that's ever done this, and like it made me feel like this game was like an actual game that everybody should be doing what they're doing. I'm just like, bro, yeah, this is why didn't you believe this when people played the like 1,000-Year Door, like Paper Mario? Like, because that was a game that did exactly what Clair Obscure is doing. Like, exactly. It's very similar. Not exactly, but you get what I'm saying. The system is the exact same. It's a turn-based battle system where during an enemy attack, you have the ability to time something correctly that then gives you a benefit in battle, you know? Whether it be turning the attack back on them or lessening the damage that you can get. Like, that is something that many games turn-based have done, you know? This is no news. No, nothing new here. To say these characters are all amazing, absolutely not. 2 of them are. 2 of them are amazing. The rest of them are fine. They're around. I've played JRPGs with far better overall casts than this particular game. You know, like, I think that, you know, CL is like hardly even a character. In terms of her overall impact on the story and like how the game even treats her in terms of her overall impact on the story and gameplay. It's hard for me to say that that's like completely accurate. Again, I don't think that the game's story gets really, really good until Act 3. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's bad. But I do think that like that's when the game gets truly impressive is Act 3. You know, I do think Act 1 is pretty impressive, like at least the very beginning of it, certainly. But I think again, Act 3 is really where everything comes together and becomes amazing. So like, you know, like, is this game the greatest of all time? Bro, I don't even know if this game is the greatest of this year. Like, you do understand that we have like Mario Kart World coming out, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Death Stranding 2, like, bro. Like, that's just off the top of my head. And I know there are other, like, Ghost of Yotei. Ghost of Yotei is not going to be Game of the Year, but, like, that's going to be another big game everybody's going to really want to play. You know, like, to say this is one of the best games of all time, and it may not even be the highest reviewed game of the year. We don't even know what's coming out for the rest of the year. You know, Nintendo this summer could announce, oh, yeah, another Zelda game is coming out. New Zelda game coming out to the Switch 2. New 3D Mario game coming out to the Switch 2 this year. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, everybody's going to forget about Clair Obscure in like freaking 6 months. By the time November or December rolls around and we're giving out Game of the Year awards, is anybody going to remember? Because there's going to be a big conversation around Game of the Year, and every year, guess what gets left out? Games that came out in the beginning of the year. Nobody cares. Everybody forgets. Everybody has recency bias, and they choose games that they just played and they think are really good. And I think if you were ever going to be like, this game is one of the best games of all time, you need to give it a year. I think that's like my rule of thumb, is you need to give it a year before you're like, this is one of the best games ever made. Like, this is one of my top 10 games ever. Like, you cannot just beat a game and then be like riding the high of just beating that game and be like, yo, this is one of the best games I've ever played in my whole life. Because you're riding that high, you know? Which, that high is important, but like, once that high is gone and you look at a game objectively, and, you know, obviously every personal ranking is subjective, sure, but like, there is an objective way to even view something subjectively, I think, that, you know, as much as that doesn't make sense, I think, you know, hopefully you understand what I'm saying, that, you know, like, you are going to probably be like, yeah, I remember really enjoying that game. Do I enjoy it more than, I don't know, what's your favorite game of all time? You know, like, more than what's your number 5 game of all time? Number 10. Do I enjoy it more than that? I don't know. That's a lot harder to make the call. It's very, 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 very rare for me to ever make that call, because a lot of my favorite games of all time are nostalgia-based. And it's very difficult for me to like look back within 5 years and be like, oh yeah, that game was, or even a year, and be like, oh yeah, that game was legit one of my favorite games ever. Because a lot of games are, well, this is, you know, kind of like, this particular system has been done better by this game a year later, or this story maybe was better in this game, and so on and so forth. And what really upsets me about the way that this game has been talked about is that, and I think you can genuinely hear this the last time I talked about this in my previous episode, was like, I was like, bro, I'm so dismayed. Like, I was like not enjoying the game as much as I could have been because I was sitting there like frustrated. I was like, why am I not enjoying this game as much as everybody else? Everybody else is saying this is their favorite game of all time. Everybody else is, this is a 92 on Metacritic. Like, yeah, it's really good, and like I understand why it's got that score, but like, why is everybody saying this is one of the greatest games ever made? And I am not getting like, I'm not drawn to this game. I'm not resonating with this game in a like best game of all time way. Like this should be so up my alley. Like, this should be one of my favorite games of all time because everybody else is saying that, and I am not getting that feeling, and now I'm really just confused as to why I feel so differently. That's just odd to me. I don't like that. And I think that this talk around this game that's been so hyperbolic, so above and beyond what it probably deserves is really hurt my experience of this game that really still is very special and still is very good, and I still would certainly recommend. And I don't know. I think people need to take a step back and really kind of think about this game in more than just like the hype. And maybe, like maybe this is the first game like this they've played like this, in many different ways. Maybe this is the first game they've ever played that has a story as, as interesting as this, or the first turn-based game that they've ever played that has turn-based combat that has active elements. Or the first game where you can really manipulate your damage numbers to a almost godlike potential, to a broken extent. The first game that they could really break in any way. And I've played games like, I play a lot of games. So I've played games like that all the time, not all the time. Most games like that are pretty rare. But I've certainly played games like that with stories that touch me, with combat that is very well designed, with characters that are incredibly well done, with soundtracks that are really, really great. And, like having all of those elements be in one package is normally very, very rare, right? It's incredibly rare. And this game certainly does have that. But to look back across every game that's ever been made, and say this is the first one or this is the best one that's ever done that, I think we really need to take some time and evaluate that statement. And I think that it has really gone above and beyond in terms of that I don't know if I agree with that statement yet. Maybe I will. Maybe in a year I'll say I understand why people say that and I agree. But right now, I think it's kind of insane that we're all like, not we are all, but like a large number of people are saying this is one of the greatest games ever made, and it makes me feel like I'm freaking stupid for not saying that. But like now I actually do understand why they're saying that, and I just think it's a very hyperbolic statement, which makes me feel a whole lot better. But still, really enjoyed my time with this game. Absolutely my game of the year so far, but I am objective enough to realize that there are more games coming out because we are not even halfway through the year yet. And that is likely the case. That there may be another game that is better than this one that could possibly come out. So we're going to wait and see, right? But overall, highly recommend Clair Obscure. Definitely check it out. It's not even $70. It's $50. It's a steal for a game like this that you will most certainly enjoy. It is a steal. Highly recommend. Go out and play Clair Obscure today, and then think about in a year if it's on your top 10 games of all time list. But that's it for my impressions. I think, I would love to hit the 2-hour mark, and we're getting very close. So, yeah. I had another game I could have gotten into that I started, but it's a very long game. We may get into it next time. But this is definitely the main topic of discussion I wanted to get into in my impressions. So hopefully you enjoyed this episode of the Plug in Play podcast. As usual, I really do appreciate you sticking around this long. I appreciate you listening at all. Thank you for clicking on the play button. Thank you for listening to any element of the show. Whether you used timestamps, jumped around, only listened to one thing, doesn't matter to me, man. You were here, and that is all I care about. Well, that and how beautiful your soul is. You have a beautiful soul, and I love you. Don't listen to those other people. I love you. I really love you. Divorce your wife or husband and come and live with me because I love you. Okay, that was a really weird way to end the podcast. So, yeah, just scratch that. Don't listen to that. But anyway, yes, thank you for listening to this episode of the Plug and Play podcast. I'm definitely rambling now. I will leave you to your video games. I will leave you to the rest of your day, your free time. I, again, appreciate you. Thank you, friend. And bye-bye.